Welcome to the Depth Dive. Today, we're embarking on, well, an absolutely fascinating journey into the life and enduring legacy of a figure arguably unrivaled in modern history, Napoleon Bonaparte. I mean, this is a man whose story is so compelling, so epic, that even 2 centuries after his death, you've got major filmmakers like Ridley Scott still investing huge amounts to bring his tumultuous life to the big screen.
It's incredible, the staying power.
It really is. So our mission today is pretty straightforward. We've pulled together a substantial stack of sources, everything from rigorous historical analyses, illuminating YouTube transcripts, detailed Wikipedia entries, even some incisive economic viewpoints.
Quite a mix.
Yeah, and from this wealth of material, we're going to try and extract the most potent nuggets of knowledge and insight. Our goal, to give you that essential shortcut to becoming truly well-informed about this colossal and, let's face it, incredibly controversial figure.
And I think the central question we're grappling with throughout this deep dive is, how do we really unpack Napoleon's enduring legacy? Was he primarily, a visionary hero who brought order, stability, and sweeping reform to a chaotic post-revolutionary France and, well, much of Europe?
Right.
Or was he more of a ruthless villain whose insatiable ambition unleashed immense suffering and devastation across the continent, basically shaping borders with a trail of blood?
Yeah.
And as is so often the case with figures of this monumental scale, the truth, as we'll see, is far more nuanced. It lies somewhere in that complex space between hero and villain. It's crucial to remember that Napoleon remains, as some sources put it, a cultural battlefield in France and beyond, sparks passionate debate even today.
A cultural battle, that's a powerful phrase, and it really sets the stage, doesn't it? Suggests he's still deeply divisive.
Very much so.
So what we're going to do is trace his meteoric, almost unbelievable rise, then dive into the transformative reforms he put in place, confront the incredibly costly wars that defined his era, and finally grapple with the controversies that continue to shape his memory today. It's a lot to cover, but wow, what a story. Okay, let's unpack this. The meteoric ascent, from Corsica to commander. When we think of Napoleon, we often picture the conqueror, the emperor. But his story actually begins in a place and, well, in a way that might genuinely surprise you.
Definitely.
He was born Napoleon Bonaparte in Corsica back in 1769. His family, surprisingly, was of Italian descent, with ancestors from Tuscan nobility and Lombardy. And his father had this kind of shifting allegiance, initially supporting Corsican independence before, pragmatically befriending the French governor.
A political operator, even then.
Seems like it. But perhaps the most formative influence in his early life was his mother. Her firm discipline was apparently legendary, reportedly keeping a pretty rambunctious young Napoleon in line.
Right. And what's truly fascinating here is how those early experiences almost immediately set him apart and, well, likely fueled his ambition. At just 9 years old, he was sent to mainland France.
9? Wow.
Yeah, first to a religious school in Autun to improve his French, which he spoke with this thick Corsican accent, apparently spelled terribly, and then to the military academy at Brienne-le-Château.
Okay.
And you have to imagine being this young outsider,
Right.
routinely bullied for your accent, your birthplace, even your perceived short stature, although we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
Yet, despite being this outsider, he didn't just survive. He absolutely excelled in subjects like mathematics, history, geography. An examiner even noted he would make an excellent sailor, which, well, given his later career, is a pretty amusing understatement.
Yeah, just a bit.
But that constant need to prove himself, forged in those early challenging years, it really became a defining characteristic, didn't it?
Absolutely. And that drive, that insatiable ambition you just highlighted, it quickly propelled him right into the heart of the tumultuous French Revolution. Tell us about his rapid ascent there. It almost feels like the chaos of the revolution was sort of tailor-made for his particular genius.
Absolutely. The revolution, especially in its early chaotic phase, was something of a meritocracy, and Napoleon just seized that opportunity. A pivotal moment, almost a legendary one, came in 1793 at the Siege of Toulon.
Right, Toulon.
He was a mere 24-year-old artillery commander, but he successfully led this daring assault against royalist occupiers. And he wasn't directing from some distant command post either. He was right in the thick of it, reportedly getting stabbed in the thigh by a British soldier during the attack.
No way.
Yeah, this wasn't just a victory. It was this brazen display of personal courage and, frankly, strategic brilliance that marked him as someone truly exceptional.
What an entrance onto the stage. And he was also politically savvy for such a young man, too, wasn't he?
He was, yeah. His early career saw him aligning with the radical Jacobins, and he played a key role in suppressing royalist insurgents in Paris in 1795. It was around this time, coinciding with his marriage to Josephine de Beauharnais in 1796, that he began to consistently use the French form Napoleon Bonaparte, rather than his original Italian name, Napoleonic Bonaparte.
Interesting.
Yeah, a subtle yet very symbolic step towards fully embracing his French identity and, well, his destiny.
Okay, here's where it truly gets electrifying, I think. Just 2 days after his marriage, he takes command of the Army of Italy. In the First Italian campaign, from 1796 to 1797, he secured this series of absolutely decisive victories, culminating in the Battle of Rivoli.
A masterpiece.
Right. That triumph didn't just win a battle, it shattered the entire Austrian position in Italy. It cost them an astonishing 43% of their soldiers dead, wounded, or taken prisoner. The sheer speed, the innovative tactics, the devastating impact of his campaigns were just completely unprecedented for the time. It established his reputation as a military prodigy.
For sure. And it was a reputation he then sought to expand, maybe even solidify. He launched the Egyptian expedition from 1798 to 1799.
Right, Egypt. Always found that part fascinating.
It wasn't solely military, which is interesting. He famously brought scholars and scientists with him, showcasing this remarkable intellectual curiosity beyond just conquest.
Yeah.
But it also presented significant military challenges, like the failed siege of Acre. And, in one of the grim details from the sources, there are these allegations that he ordered plague-stricken men to be poisoned with opium to hasten the army's retreat.
Wow, that's dark.
It is a stark example of his, perhaps, ruthless pragmatism. Ultimately, he decided to return to France upon learning of French defeats in the War of the Second Coalition back in Europe. He knew where the real power struggle was playing out, too, consolidating power, the emperor and his reforms.
And upon his return, Napoleon wasted absolutely no time, did he? We see the dramatic coup of 18 Brumaire in November 1799, where he basically engineered the overthrow of the French Directory and emerged as first consul. Now, while outwardly maintaining the guise of a republic, historians describe his regime as a dictatorship by plebiscite, or even a soft despotism. Apparently, plebiscite results were often manipulated to project this overwhelming public support. How did he manage to pull off this illusion of popular legitimacy while consolidating such immense power so quickly?
Well, that's the real genius of his political maneuvering, isn't it? He understood the revolutionary desire for order and stability after years and years of chaos, but he also recognized the power of public opinion, or at least the appearance of it.
Right.
He offered this appearance of popular participation through plebiscites, effectively asking the public to approve his consolidation of power. And during his time as first consul, from 1799 to 1804, he didn't just rule, he fundamentally rebuilt France. He implemented this suite of significant and crucially enduring domestic reforms that profoundly shaped the nation and actually provided a blueprint for other states.
Okay, like what specific?
Well, for instance, he established a highly centralized administration with prefects, sub-prefects, and mayors managing regional departments, a system that, still echoes in France today.
Still there.
Yeah. The Council of State, which he founded in 1799 as an advisory body of experts that drafted laws, still advises the French government. But perhaps most crucially, he established the Banque de France in 1800 as the central bank.
The Bank of France. Huge.
Huge. This wasn't just a bank, it was a game changer. It stabilized the economy with a unified currency, managed government finances. It became a foundational model for other European nations. What's truly insightful here is how Napoleon, primarily a military man, really grasped that stable finance was the bedrock of imperial power.
Interesting point.
He didn't just win battles. He created the financial machinery that sustained the whole enterprise.
He truly laid the groundwork for modern statecraft, didn't he? Beyond just military might. And what about other reforms that touched everyday life?
Absolutely. We see the official introduction of the metric system in 1801, which his armies then spread across Western Europe, despite some initial resistance. Imagine the chaos before that, with different local measurements everywhere.
Yeah, it must have been a mess.
And in education, he laid the foundation for a modern system of secondary and tertiary schooling, replacing old central schools with these elite lycées and establishing the baccalaureate exam system.
The baccalaureate, right.
Exactly. And these weren't just about learning for learning's sake. They were designed specifically to produce skilled bureaucrats and military officers loyal to the state, building a new meritocratic elite.
So what does this all mean, then, for the trajectory of the French Revolution's ideals under his rule? Because he consolidated his power even further, right? First becoming consul for life in 1802, and then, in a truly symbolic and, well, dramatic move, crowning himself Emperor of the French in 1804. He even crowned himself King of Italy in 1805. This shift from revolutionary general to self-proclaimed emperor marked such a profound, almost paradoxical transformation. It blended revolutionary principles with this undeniably authoritarian style. How did he justify this to a populace that had, just overthrown a monarchy?
It was a fascinating act of political theater and pragmatism. Basically, he argued that the empire was necessary to preserve the gains of the revolution, things like stability, property rights, national greatness against external enemies, and internal chaos.
Right, the strong hand needed.
Exactly. And his early imperial period was certainly marked by stunning military triumphs that really bolstered this narrative. In the War of the Third Coalition in 1805, he achieved what many historians consider his greatest victory at the Battle of Austerlitz.
Austerlitz, yeah, iconic.
Absolutely. There, he masterfully shattered the coalition, inflicting something like 25,000 casualties while sustaining fewer than 7,000 himself. This wasn't just a victory. It was a psychological obliteration that led directly to the dissolution of the ancient Holy Roman Empire.
Wow.
He followed this with decisive victories against Prussia at Jena Auerstedt and Russia at Friedland in the War of the Fourth Coalition from 1806 to 1807. During this period, he also imposed the Continental System.
Ah, yes, the blockade against Britain.
Exactly, a large-scale trade embargo against Britain. But despite his grand intentions to cripple his greatest rival, it proved incredibly challenging to enforce across his vast, diverse empire. Led to widespread violations, smuggling. It was a strategic move that, ironically, ended up creating immense economic strain within his own territories.
Kind of backfired in a way.
To a large extent, yes. It was very difficult to maintain. Third, the seeds of decline, costly wars and retreats.
But even for a military genius like Napoleon, there were turning points, weren't there? What some sources bluntly call it the dark side of his rule, where his ambition began to overreach. The Peninsular War, which raged from 1808 to 1814, was arguably the first major crack in his empire. It was sparked by his decision to install his brother Joseph as King of Spain.
Not a popular move.
No. It immediately provoked widespread Spanish resistance. And this wasn't a conventional war. It plunged the region into this brutal, drawn-out guerrilla conflict, a type of warfare Napoleon was, frankly, ill-equipped to combat. He himself later called it the unlucky war that ruined me.
He really said that.
Yeah.
All right.
It was an immense drain on resources, tying up around 300,000 French troops and resulting in a staggering 150,000 French casualties. It was a true quagmire.
It absolutely was. And then came the War of the Fifth Coalition in 1809, the Battle of Aspern-Essling. Even though there was a later French victory at Wagram, it truly damaged his aura of invincibility because of the heavy losses his forces sustained.
Showed he could bleed.
Exactly. It showed he wasn't unbeatable. And, in an attempt to solidify his dynasty and forge stronger alliances, he strategically divorced Josephine.
Always felt a bit sad that.
Yeah, and married Marie-Louise, an Austrian archduchess, in 1810. This was a move away from, any notion of romantic love and purely about consolidating power and ensuring a bloodline to continue his empire.
Pure politics.
Pure politics. Yet, even with this strategic marriage, the most catastrophic miscalculation was arguably still ahead. The invasion of Russia in 1812.
Oh, Russia, the big one.
The big one. His Grand Armée, this colossal force of 600,000 men, managed to briefly occupy Moscow. But they faced this truly brutal combination of scorched earth tactics by the Russians, the unforgiving Russian winter.
The famous General Winter.
Exactly, and devastating disease during this agonizing retreat. The images of those frozen, starving troops retreating across the vast Russian plains are just haunting.
Unimaginable.
Historians widely view both the Peninsular War and this Russian invasion as dramatic miscalculations that fundamentally drained his empire of its strength, its resources, and crucially, its morale. It was a turning point from which he never truly recovered.
The tide had absolutely turned.
Completely. The formation of the Sixth Coalition from 1813 to 1814 saw Sweden, Prussia, Austria joining Russia. They all realized his vulnerability. This culminated in his decisive defeat at the Battle of Leipzig in October 1813, often called the Battle of the Nations.
Right, massive battle.
The largest battle of the Napoleonic Wars, a truly huge multinational engagement that ultimately led to the invasion of France itself, his first abdication in April 1814, and his subsequent exile to the tiny island of Elba. It really seemed like the story was over then. 4. A contested legacy. Reforms, criticisms, and enduring impact.
But of course, with Napoleon, nothing is ever truly over, is it? From Elba, he staged his dramatic 100 Days escape.
incredible comeback attempt.
But it ultimately ended in his final definitive defeat at the Battle of Waterloo in June 1815. He was then exiled to the far more remote island of St. Helena, where he died apparently of stomach cancer in May 1821.
A lonely end.
Yeah. But it's fascinating how the public remained captivated by his story even after his death, so much so that his remains were returned to France in 1840 and entombed in glory in Les Invalides. The legend just kept growing.
Indeed, the fascination never waned. But if we delve deeper into his lasting positive influence, one of his most significant contributions is undoubtedly the Napoleonic Code of 1804.
Ah, the Code. Okay.
This wasn't just a legal document. It was a groundbreaking, clear, accessible set of national laws that transformed legal systems. It enshrined principles like equality before the law, religious toleration, secure property rights, and it systematically abolished the vestiges of feudalism.
Huge changes.
Massive. This code, carried across Europe by his armies, influenced legal systems globally. It's been described by one historian as the most effective agency for the propagation of the basic principles of the French Revolution. He essentially created a unified, rational legal framework for, well, an entire continent.
So on one hand, we have this incredible legacy of legal reform that still shapes societies today. But as we discussed, his legacy is also deeply, deeply contested. We have to confront the significant criticisms and controversies that paint a very different picture.
Absolutely.
For instance, his record on civil rights and social policies is, to put it mildly, mixed. He reintroduced slavery in French colonies in 1802 after it had been abolished back in 1794.
A huge step backwards.
And he even imposed laws forbidding people of color from entering France and forcing the breakup of interracial marriages. It's jarring, isn't it, to see these regressions alongside his progressive legal code? What does this tell us about the man and the conflicting ideals he embodied?
It really highlights the paradox of Napoleon, doesn't it? A man supposedly of the Enlightenment, who also exhibited these profound contradictions. The reintroduction of slavery was indeed a profound fault, a betrayal of the spirit of the Enlightenment, likely driven by economic opportunism in the sugar colonies.
Right. Money talks.
Pretty much. And you're right, the Napoleonic Code itself, while revolutionary in many ways, was actually a setback for nascent female equality. It specifically reinforced men's legal control over women and limited their property rights. So while it streamlined and rationalized, it also entrenched certain social hierarchies that benefited men.
And it wasn't just about social policies, was it? We also can't ignore his increasingly authoritarian rule. His use of censorship, the closure of independent newspapers, bypassing direct elections, exiling critics, especially after 1807. It's a stark contrast to the revolutionary ideals of liberty he ostensibly championed.
Exactly. He was a man who seemed to believe in order above all else, and he saw dissent and a free press as direct threats to that order and, well, to his authority.
Makes sense from his perspective, I suppose.
And then there's the staggering human cost.
Yeah.
The Napoleonic Wars are estimated to have claimed up to 6 million lives across Europe. That's an enormous number.
Devastating.
Yeah. He also institutionalized plunder, with French museums still housing art stolen from conquered territories. That's still controversial today. And in one particularly grim detail from the sources, there's the massacre of 3,000 to 5,000 Turkish prisoners of war in Syria, an act that speaks volumes about the brutal realities of his campaigns.
That's truly sobering. A reminder of the darker side of his ambition. So how do we reconcile this complex personality, the brilliant reformer and military genius, with the ruthless authoritarian and conqueror who brought so much death and devastation?
Well, that's precisely why in modern French discourse, it's really about finding a balanced perspective.
Yeah.
You can't just pick one side. His was a complex personality. Undeniably highly intelligent, incredibly organized and pragmatic, especially in his early years. Yet he also harbored this romantic, almost grandiose vision of empire, and was, perhaps surprisingly, superstitious, believing in omens and lucky stars. He was a master of grand strategy, but also capable of shocking brutality.
Right.
And just for the record, that whole Napoleon complex myth about his height, it's just that, a myth. He was actually of average height for his time.
Ah, good to clear that up.
Yeah. You really have to weigh all these multiple, often contradictory facets when considering him. Understand that he was a product of his time, but also a transformative force who bent that time to his will for better and for worse.
Okay. When we zoom out then, Napoleon's long-term impact on the very map and future of Europe is just undeniable, isn't it? Extending far beyond his lifetime.
Oh, absolutely.
His reorganization of hundreds of those Kleinstaaten, the small German states, into more streamlined confederations, it unintentionally ignited the rise of nationalism, didn't it? And set the stage for the eventual unification movements in Germany and Italy. He shook up the old order so profoundly that new identities had to emerge.
Indeed, he reshaped Europe in ways that continue to reverberate for a century or more. We also see a massive demographic shift in the post-Napoleonic era, what's been called the greatest intercontinental migration, with some 30 million Europeans relocating to the United States between 1815 and 1914, often fleeing the instability his wars had caused or enabled.
Wow, 30 million.
Yeah, and incredibly, his own dream of a unified Europe with shared principles, measurement systems, civil codes, it uncannily reemerged more than a century later in the form of the European Union.
That's a fascinating echo.
It really is. A remarkable, almost poetic echo of his grand vision, though obviously achieved through very different means. Outro.
What an incredible, often contradictory story we've uncovered today about Napoleon Bonaparte. From his unlikely beginnings on that small Corsican island to his revolutionary reforms that truly shaped modern legal and administrative systems, to his military genius that redrew maps, and then the immense human cost and controversial policies of his reign. It's clear why his is a legacy still so vigorously debated 2 centuries later. He was truly a force of nature.
He really was. And perhaps that leaves us with a provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider. How does one individual with such a potent and often terrifying mix of profound achievements and devastating actions continue to inspire, provoke, and shape our understanding of leadership, progress, and the very nature of power?